record on this computer. Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to the CAPV office hours on the 4th of January. I don't remember the full text, but basically we are tuned to the CNCF code of conduct, be nice to each other, etc., etc. If you're new here and you want to introduce yourself, I'll wait for a minute.
At least from our side, Stefan, we do have a new member that is joining us this week, and that's Neil Gerard. He joined my team just this week, so he's helping out with some of our cluster API initiatives for vSphere, so it's good to have him here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beat me to the punch, Richard. I was getting all the buttons working here.
I didn't want to put you on the spot.
No, this one is my first time, so I was going to actually do it this one. The CAPV one, I was there a few times as a shadow before I got full-time on this team. So, but yeah, like Richard said, I joined the team and looking forward to working with y'all on making this as good as we can make it.
Nice. Likewise. Alrighty. Good. Oh yeah, maybe I'll just come up with some ad hoc news. Actually, I think it should be on. Christian was mostly working on this, but basically we were working on Kubernetes 129 support, which shouldn't be that big of a deal. The situation is basically that in core cluster API, it is already supported on main and under 1.6 release branch, but it will be officially supported with the upcoming release. So there's a release, I think, on 16th January, should be some point within the next 2 weeks, where we officially support 129 in core cluster API. And in CAPV, the current status that we essentially merged the PR on main, where we are using 1.29 OVAs based on image builder with green tests, essentially. We just had one problem, and that was CAPV. Essentially, CAPV, as of now, I wouldn't say it's not compatible with 129, but it has some problems. So essentially, we had to do 2 workarounds. So one workaround was essentially the CAPV pod that we deploy on the control planes. It is using host aliases to be able to talk with the local API server. That doesn't work anymore with Kubernetes 129. I'll talk to Christian. So we have like 2 CAPV issues where the problems are described. We have a PR in CAPV where we work around them, but we don't yet have an issue in CAPV to track those workarounds and make and then essentially get rid of them once stuff changes in CAPV or upstream. But I'll make sure that we have that issued so that that's visible in CAPV as well. Yeah. So one problem was host aliases. Essentially, we worked around that one by just mounting like an etc host file in the CAPV pod, which works good enough. And the second problem is kubeadm changed its behavior. So kubeadm before 129 essentially generated an admin.conf with system masters. So essentially, if you were using this admin.conf kubevib, it just skipped RBAC entirely, and you could just do whatever you want with that one. And they improved that. So what they're doing now is they are creating a super admin.conf, which is still a system master. And then they create an admin.conf, which has correct groups. I don't remember which ones. And then they are deploying corresponding RBAC so that the admin.conf is still cluster admin, but not by jumping around RBAC with system master, but by actually having proper RBAC. The problem that we have is essentially that kubevib is still using this admin.conf, and we have a chicken egg situation between kubeadm deploying RBAC so that admin.conf is actually cluster admin, and kubevib making the API server available so that kubeadm can actually talk to the API server to deploy RBAC. One workaround was essentially to use the super admin config instead, because that's the system master. But then the problem is that the super admin config is only available on the first control plane machine that we ever create, and on every later control plane machine that's not there. So essentially we have a hack in there right now where on the very first control plane machine, we use the super admin config, and on every after that, we use the admin config, and then the admin config just works because RBAC was already deployed when we created the first control plane machine. Yeah, so that's the current state. There are 2 issues in kubevib to track this problem. We talked, or I wasn't there, but Christian talked with the kubevib maintainer and with Lubomir, so kubeadm maintainer, And I think they came up with some ideas on how to solve it, but I don't know more than that. So I'll leave a short note here that we have some backgrounds. I linked the issues after we're done. Yeah, so that's the current state of 129 supporting CAPV essentially. Any questions, ideas, comments? Okay. Yeah, I think otherwise, nothing else that I can think of that happened like within the last 2 weeks, but I was mostly on video. So I think, except if someone else has something on news updates, probably, yeah, that's it for now. Yeah, one additional point. Sorry, just making this up as I go. So we want to create a new CAPV release sooner or later, rather sooner than later, and essentially one that builds on top of Cluster API 1.6. I have to like reconvene with Fabrizio and Christian once they're back, because we were like, first I was on PDO and then they were on PDO, just what the current state is. But the idea was essentially something like, okay, core cluster API 1.6 is out, we do a bit of stuff, and then we release CAPV 1.9 relatively quickly. And I would assume that we're pretty much there, plus minus a week or two, that we also want to release CAPV, but I have to touch point just to see if I'm missing anything. So, yeah, but otherwise, nothing from my side that I can think of. Alrighty. Yeah, any topics for discussion? I don't know. Since I joined those meetings, we never had action items. What it's worth.
I don't think we have much from the Red Hat side right now, just because we're still catching up from being out for a few weeks too. So
yeah, seems good. Max, anything from your side? Probably all good. IPM is working. So, yeah, sounds good. Alrighty. Okay. Okay. Yeah, then if you want, we can take a look at the country hours. I will probably skip over looking over the issues today, just that it doesn't get that late, and we can start doing that again in 2 weeks when also like my colleagues are back again. Then I have a bit more of discussion on it. Okay, but this one also might take, I don't know, half an hour or something. Let's see.
Stefan, I did have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my team manages the CI infrastructure for our internal VMware environments. I was wondering if there was any help needed in looking after the CI environments to back the CAPV projects. Or if there was VMware specific CI infrastructure that we have in place.
Yep. So let's start with me telling like what the current state is. So essentially what we do is our CI, just the very first thing we run, like the prod jobs, they're just run in regular upstream pro. But then the VMware specific stuff starts, which is essentially we have a VMC environment, so VMware Cloud on AWS in that case environment. And our normal unit tests, linting, and all that sort of stuff is just running in prod directly. But whenever we actually do some sort of end-to-end testing, we are basically opening. So inside of the prod shop pod, we are running our management cluster with CAPV. But when we're actually creating stuff in infrastructure, for that we open a VPN to this VMC environment. And then run tests against it. And that VMC environment is basically, in current state, entirely VMware owned. Only VMware people have access, this sort of stuff, which is not great. We had some discussions with SIG testing, because ideally, like all the upstream CI is owned by upstream. But at least where we are right now is that, let's say, for the moment, everyone was happy that VMware is essentially paying for this VMC environment, because it would be relatively expensive to pay VMC on AWS for the community. And also like this VMware Broadcom takeover thing going on. I want essentially let the dust settle a little bit before we try to talk to our management chain, because also that actually the management chain is stable and this sort of stuff to see before we can change something. So the TLDR essentially we're fine for now. We're able to keep it up. It's not great in the sense of that it's not community owned or not really transparent. So that's definitely pretty bad. But it is from a starting perspective. You're okay.
We've had very similar issues to fund. Been trying to fund that internally, so we've used VMC for that same reason before. It's just an easy to use environment.
Yep. Yeah, so that's the current state. What we're currently working on a little bit is I don't know how much you know like the internals of CAPV, but essentially, I mean, CAPV are like two big different modes that CAPV is running in. The first one is basically where it's talking directly to the vCenter APIs with the Go vMomi library. And then there is this other mode where it essentially leverages the VM operator. And CAPV is basically just a small shim. And the current situation is that, as far as I know, from a community perspective, almost everyone is using the variant where CAPV is talking directly to vCenter. And that's also the part where we have end-to-end test coverage for it. But what Fabrizio and Christian worked on the last few weeks was that we also find a way that we can also end-to-end test the other mode. So that would be something like instead of directly talking to a vCenter, we can deploy the VM operator in our end-to-end test environment, and then also test this mode. That's just something around end-to-end. I'm not really sure if anyone apart from VMware is using like this VM operator mode. Just to at least share that there's something coming up there. I assume we will have some PRs soon to extend upstream coverage for this stuff. Yep. Okay. So far, so good about end-to-end for now. Okay. Good. I'll just go over the PRs and see if there's something that makes sense to talk about. Most of them are probably stale since at least last year. Okay, so first up, end-to-end test coverage for IPAM support. We should probably revive that one, but that's also, that's one of the annoying pieces where essentially the overlap to, or how is this this VMC environment exactly set up is pretty high.
We did do an E2E for our implementation of IPAM in our machine API. Something we might be able to help with. We're moving towards CAPV away from machine API, and we're probably going to tackle this ourselves. So maybe something we can help contribute. Yep.
We should definitely talk about how the current end-to-end environment works and where we can go from there. The point is essentially that we need some sort of IPAM for IPAM. That's the main blocker here. Essentially, we have like this one, with our current environment, we have like this one VMC environment, we have one IP pool, but when we run end-to-end tests for a specific PR or something, we need to get an IP pool or something for this specific end-to-end test so that we can use IPs there and doesn't overlap with other end-to-end tests running parallel. So that's the main thing here. But I think first, you probably have to talk about how the current stuff works, also behind the scenes, because that's not visible anywhere else. And then it's easier to discuss what we have to do to make this work upstream. One question: you probably then also have a need to run like CAPV end-to-end tests on your side as well, right? I mean, let's assume you need to fork at some point, or you have some commits on top, et cetera, et cetera. So there is some synergy effects that essentially we run like end-to-end tests here on upstream in our VMC environment, but you'll need something similar in your environment.
Absolutely, yeah. We're not quite ready to flip to CAPV yet, but it's something that we're already thinking about how we're going to make that transition. And end-to-end is something we really need to get working for us too. So.
What I can definitely say is, so we're using VMC for this stuff. but it's not really that our end-to-end tests are VMC specific, as far as I might be missing some minor details, but in general, they're not. It's just that we build a bunch of stuff into VMC so that we can use for end-to-end testing. So we had to deploy an LDAP server there so that we can actually have a user that we hand over to Pro to access vCenter and this sort of stuff. But that's not relevant for the actual end-to-end test code. So
I'm certainly happy to share how we've tackled testing static IPs in our environment, because it may be some patterns that you could use as well. So I'd be happy to go over that if and when you're ready to talk about it.
Yep.
We also have some form of testing setup. It's basically split between just using the Infoblox provider as IPAM, so not having the in-cluster IPAM, which is a lot easier to deal with, or by just having static networks for each test and just having a maximum number of tests that can run concurrently, basically.
Yep. So we have some sort of resource pooling. I mean, our resource pool is it's ambiguous in the
we mostly do that for actually testing OS images at the moment. We just have a static list of predetermined clusters with networks that we just try to basically bootstrap with those specific images. They also just have a network and all that stuff assigned. It's basically 5 different networks that can be used and will automatically be cleaned up after the test finishes, but it's just static.
And how do you pick like which of those networks specific tests will get? You probably have just some minimal code there, right? Just see if there's a free one, pick one, reserve it, and then
basically just looking in vCenter if VMs in the resource pool exist. If don't, then just go ahead and pick. And if those exist, then just try the next pool.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, what we were thinking about is, I mean, one possible solution for this IP stuff. I mean, what is used in other providers is Boscos, essentially, where you say, hey, give me an AWS account, and then I run my end-to-end test in there. And I think what we could do is we could also deploy Boscos and say, hey, we have 5 or 10 IP pools there. And then a test can just say, hey, pick one. Maybe it's too much, but on the other side,
I mean, that's the way we do it. That's the way we do it, and it scales pretty well because it's
nice.
Network for each lease. You know what you need to set up. So.
Yeah, perfect. Yep. Okay. I'll make a note on my side just in general to follow up. And I think I'll open an issue and just start with some notes on like this behind the scenes stuff, just to share how that looks like. At least, I mean, the relevant parts, we don't really need like the permission and all that stuff in the background, but yeah, what you have deployed there and how does it integrates with our upstream end-to-end scripts and stuff. And oh yeah, also just to share in general, we have, I mean, I'm not working on that, but apparently we have a lot of IPAM tests downstream. So just like general confidence level about that feature. So it's not just, oh, we don't have any tests. We just, from a VMware perspective, we just don't have them upstream. That's the problem. Alrighty. Okay, that was a fun one. I think that. So the topic was essentially to be able to specify different credentials for, I guess, either individual vSphere machines or probably vSphere machine templates, I guess. I know that at some point Nadir wanted to follow up on that, and then nothing really happened. Yeah, not much going on here. I don't really have a spontaneous take on it. Yes.
It's something that we're going to need to support as well. Is multi vCenter in CAPV, so this is something we're interested in for sure.
Yep. I'm really wondering is what we're doing on this side, because I think I somehow remember that we maybe support it, but I'm not sure.
It would seem like it would be supported because I think you can already provide specific credentials for.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm missing something here. Okay. Yeah, I think we have to take a closer look. Probably on our side, at least ask the people who are more familiar with CAPV on the product side. Or that one. Content library support proposal. So what is the current state here? So I think it's mostly in review. Yeah. So what I do know is that we support content library in the VM operator mode. And it currently works well, what I heard. But the other mode doesn't support it. And that's what the proposal should be about. Okay, that one is definitely stale. So just also general context, if you see a bunch of PRs here from VMware people that are stale, it could be that some of those PRs are not really followed up on anymore because stuff is shuffling around and they might have to figure out if they are still interested in specific stuff or not. Let's say it very generic. So I'm not sure if that is something that is still important for Ricardo, for example. Definitely not the last few months. Yeah, similar to this one. There was some activity at the beginning, but then not much anymore. I don't really know the background. Just ask. So yeah, what I would definitely recommend, like for you, just if you're interested in some of that stuff, if you need it, etc., definitely push it back up so that it goes out of this super stale state. And you see there's interest, or yeah, or I mean, when you have time and you want it, etc., essentially potentially take it up. Yeah, vGPU, there was also not much movement on this one. So I know there was a prior PR, like yeah, that one is pretty old. Then we told that person to create a new PR against main instead of against the release branch. Oh, wait. There might even have been another PR. Yeah, I think there was a third PR, which was against the release branch. So essentially, we told them to create it against main. But this one seems to be stale again. I think I'll do a round also as a follow-up. I just ping the people who opened the PRs and ask them if they're still interested, just to get some updates. So let's see. Yeah, that's okay. Here I can say something about it. So I don't know if anyone is following that. Essentially, what we did in Core Cluster API is that we wrote a configuration for kubestate metrics, so that kubestate metrics would infer metrics based on cluster API series. So essentially, you get metrics like a cluster API, or CAPI cluster created at CAPI cluster condition status, whatever, and all this sort of stuff. And then Christian started to contribute a tool to kubestate metrics itself, so that basically you can add a bunch of markers on your API types. And then this tool would generate this metrics configuration based on the markers on your API. So this basically is similar to, you have some markers on your API types, and then you generate a CRD YAML. But just in this case, it generates a metrics configuration for kubestate metrics. And this PR is essentially VIP because the kubestate metrics PR is not merged yet. It's slowly making progress. We're hopeful to get it in there. And once that is done, we would also do this stuff. We should have already, so we already have a static configuration in CAPV if you want to use it, if you want to. So no, I only have to remember where it is. Yeah, you can ping me somewhere, or Christian, we'll find where the configuration is exactly, but we definitely have a static configuration in core CAPV and one in CAPV to produce the metrics. We just have PRs in both repositories to actually generate them based on markers instead of writing them manually. And in core cluster API, we also have Grafana dashboards for the core CAPI series at least. That's a bit of a weird PR. Essentially, there was like this theory that we are doing something wrong with context in our unit tests. So they're flaky, and changing the stuff fixes it. But I'm challenging the idea if that's actually if that theory makes sense and if that actually would fix flakiness. So that's basically stuck until someone can tell me why this PR should fix anything. Yeah, but none of us found the time to follow up on this one. In general, the tests are relatively stable in CAPV. So we know we have some flags. We recently improved our reporting so that we can use like the regular test grid and a Kate's triage tool to actually see which of our unit tests are failing how often. But relatively stable. So there's a little bit room to improve it, but nothing really like, I don't know. I would say less than 5% flakes or something. Just a rough guess. Hey, so I think that one was about adding fields to reserve memory. Yep, on the API types. Don't really know what the state of this PR is. Okay, so I think we're waiting for another round from the PR author probably in this finding. Yeah, I'll ping. Okay. So this one is to set custom labels on PCI devices. So I guess another API field somewhere. Yeah. And looks like it needs a review, I assume, based on the state here. Okay. So that's an interesting one, just checking the current state. Okay. So essentially in CAPV, we have also only for this Go vMomi mode where you talk directly to vCenter, we have a session cache for vCenter sessions. And we had some problems in the past that we had some, essentially some leaks, some session leaks. As far as I know, all that we were aware of are fixed now. But on top of fixing the known leaks, we wanted to add a metric so that it's easy to monitor how many sessions are just leaking in some way. And this PR is about adding a metric. Basically, current status is like a first iteration. We gave some feedback, and I think the PR author just didn't have time yet to take another look. So another PR, I think. Okay, now we're coming to relatively recent PRs. Okay, I don't know that one yet. Okay, so some refactoring. So because we have those two different modes, so I just don't know how familiar you are with the source codes. I'm just giving some context. So because we have those two modes that we can run in, we also have like two CRDs. So we have like one regular vSphere machine, and then we have one in like a VMware API folder, and that one is like for the VM operator mode. So we have basically mainly two controllers, which are like, okay, either go like this code path down for this one CRD or the other one for the other CRD. One of those is the vSphere cluster controller, the other one is the vSphere machine controller. The vSphere machine controller internally uses this, I think that's what Sagar is pointing at, this vSphere machine service interface, where either in the background it's doing stuff directly with vMomi, or it's leveraging the VM operator to do stuff. And it sounds like he added a new function or something I don't really know yet, but yeah, definitely one which needs reviews if someone has some. I'll definitely also get to it soon. Was just opened this week, I think. Okay, yeah, so this PR needs some fix up, but essentially the idea is we have an issue where we just want to make sure that all the objects we create have the proper cluster name label. Like basically all the objects that belong to a cluster should have. And that one fixes it up for in the VMware operator mode, a CRD that we create there. And then last but not least, so I had some discussions the last few days with control runtime maintainers around how clients work. So essentially, there's like this fun situation that depending on which client you use in control runtime, you end up with different behavior regarding if type meter is set in your API objects. So let's say you do a get call on a cluster object. It could be that API version and kind is filled out, or it could be that those fields are empty. Basically, I'm skipping some details, but the high-level picture is essentially if you use the API reader, so if you ask directly the API server, those fields are all empty. If you use the regular cache client, which is sort of the default client that you get with controller runtime, then yeah, API version and kind are filled out. And fun fact, if you use the fake client, they're always filled out, which doesn't really reflect what the real client is doing. But there will be probably a change with control runtime 0.17. Actually, it was merged today. So TLDR, if you use regular typed objects, so if you use vSphere machine, cluster, whatever, and not unstructured and not partial object meta, then you shouldn't really rely on a kind and API version being set. So this PR just makes sure I just audited like CAPV and core CAPV entirely, and I hope I found all the places where we rely on it. Yeah, we just shouldn't rely on it because it's not really, I mean, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And if you pass objects around, there's no way to, and maybe if you write a util function, you can't really know where that object is coming from. So you just shouldn't rely on this stuff being said. Yeah, so I opened that one today. Yeah, so that's just, I guess, overview of the PRs. I don't know if we want to talk about any of them, but I think it's mostly like either new PRs or stale PRs at this point. If you have some time, definitely take a look. Yeah.
I'll see if I get some time to go through and do some reviews on ones that I think I can help with.
Yeah, sounds good. Perfect. Alrighty. Yeah, I think otherwise, I mean, if anyone wants to talk about specific issues, or if we actually want to go over all issues, I would prefer to, as I said, deferring this by 2 weeks. But yeah, if there's nothing else, we're done. But feel free to bring up stuff. Oh, I totally ignored the chat, but
No, nothing for me, Stefan. Thanks.
all right. Didn't have it on the screen. Sounds good. Yeah. Okay, the boss thing. Got it. All right, good. Then done for today. Yeah, if there's anything else, either in 2 weeks or anytime in Slack, as usual. Then, bye-bye. Have a nice day.